Welcome to We Think, We Talk, sponsored by Select Care Pharmacy, a pharmacy that is non-retail but that services the smallest of group homes to the largest of skilled nursing facilities, with prompt attention and care and world-class customer service. Welcome back to another episode of We Think, We Talk. I'm Andy Garrison, your host, and it's a pleasure today to have Todd Johnson with us from Wren Hospice. Before we went to video, you and I had a great podcast conversation, and we had spoke on grief, and this is what you do. This is what you help people with every day. And I absolutely knew when we came to this platform, right. The reach out I had from people was so impactful. I told you off camera, it was almost like a reverse of what I thought it would do. We had intended, we were talking to caregivers and people in the medical field, right, helping them understand. But right, it really helped them understand, but also in their own world reality of what's going on. Okay. So I appreciate you being here and taking the time.
Good to be with you, Andy, again.
I'm just going to dive right in. Grief is tough. The word grief in itself. And I'm not drawing back from our other podcasts because I do want folks to go listen to that. I think this is important. So go back and see Todd's podcast, and we'll put it up on the link so it matches with this one. But being that you have been a chaplain in hospice care, you've been a pastor to many.
Yes.
You've dealt with people and emotions most of your professional life. So the word grief, let's just start basically. We're all going to have to face that word.
Yes. You're going to experience grief, loss on a number of levels.
What really is grief? Let's just look at it, because I think some people sometimes get grief mixed up with an outward emotion of, I don't know what that would be called. Mourning. Yes. Mourning. And so your definition from your experience, how would you define that?
Well, grief is an emotion, and the intensity of grief is based on the level of loss. In other words, the greater the intensity of a person's loss, in relation to people, in relation to identity, jobs, marriage relationships, we experience grief when there is the loss of something or someone.
Right. And, I like the something. Obviously, when we hear the word grief, we think of what you do a lot with people that are dying.
We mostly associate it with death.
But
it comes with any experience of loss.
Right. And from a medical side of the loss of something, not a person,
it could be the loss of independence.
Right. I have seen people have the same reaction in what we'll get into in a little bit, the stages. But I'm glad you brought that to the attention, because some people don't understand why is Joe acting that way.
Right.
I know I heard he lost his job and everything. He lost his home, lost his cars, whatever. But why can't he just get over it? Right. So it's more than just a losing of a person.
I think people need to realize that there are physical changes, there's some emotional, behavioral changes, and how we react to that loss that we experience.
Right.
What I do, also deals with the grief that comes before a person experiences the loss of a loved one as a hospice chaplain. And I like to describe grief kind of like an octopus with tentacles, because, grief is something that you experienced before there is ever the death of a loved one. That's anticipatory grief. But then there's also factors that affect a person when they are handling the loss of a loved one, and that is, it may be compound grief, maybe the economy the way it is today,
Yeah.
which is a difficult thing.
It's hard.
For people to navigate, especially young adults. I think of losing a parent who may be a great source of comfort and stability, structure in their life, and then not having a job or maybe a low income, with a low wage, so that there's compound grief and factors. Drugs again can be a difficult thing as well, and I think about complicated grief. What about the a person who's been told they have cancer? It's terminal.
Yeah.
And then they have an adult child that lives with them in their home that they are helping to care for and worry over their experiences, maybe with addiction. And so, they're suffering by this shock, when you think about grief.
Right.
And you think about denial, and you think about sometimes even being frustrated, those emotions of why.
Right.
Then there is having to adjust in dealing with that. And so complicated grief can be a difficult animal in and of itself to navigate through and can actually cause you to suppress your emotions.
Good point.
You're wanting to deal with the problem, deny that there's actually a problem. So, I could talk all day about experiences and emotions.
That's why I definitely needed you back. Because I told you, I said, I've told many people this, I guess just in conversation, always bring your name up all the time.
Right.
I refer them back to the podcast because grief is such a big bowl of ingredients.
Yes.
It's just truly amazing. But one thing I wanted to ask you, I thought about this, I think last night. I was just kind of thinking about our conversation. I knew I'd see you today. And when we get some bad news, especially, say, for ourselves in regards to our own mortality, that it's now going to end. I've got the diagnosis of cancer or whatever, terminal illness.
Right.
Why does our body then do something different than before we got the news? Because we have went our entire life knowing how it ends.
Knowing death is coming.
So,
it's appointed unto man wants to die.
Why do all of a sudden, and I'm talking about as an adult, somebody officially gives me the news, sort of maybe gives me a timeline. Why do things change? Why now do I start going through different emotions of grief for myself? And I know my family will, even after I pass. We'll get into many of those that you talked about. But what happens to us when that word comes and all of a sudden, because we've dealt with it way before our life, we've thought about it, I'm sure.
We've put it out of our mind.
Yeah.
Again, a whole aspect of the denial process, but when it becomes a reality and we're told the words, that we are terminal.
Yeah.
I guess for me and trying to wrap my mind around what you're asking of me in this question.
Yeah. I know it's a broad question.
It is.
I just didn't know if it was a complex. I guess you answered it though, being that we do, I guess, daily take it out of our mind. We don't live looking for it. We just know it. It's kind of like that information that you have to pull up when you have to pull it up. So, but I've always felt really bad in those situations because I've always been on the giving news, the one that has to sometimes give that news. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing how it hits so fast.
Right.
But then the family. So you as a professional, obviously a chaplain, but I call you much more than that because of your knowledge and many experiences with the first time the family needs a chaplain, and you really have to start working with them in the grieving process. How do you approach that? How do you where do you take your mind? What's your first step getting in with that family?
My first step in meeting a family who has a loved one with a terminal diagnosis is to introduce my role. But also, I would say the greatest thing I do with that initial contact is to listen. It's to hear their story.
Right.
You know,
Very important.
encourage them to open up. You know, whether they're angry
Yeah.
or whether they are numb and in disbelief.
Yes.
You know,
The disbelief
maybe
part.
overwhelmed. You know, with all the information that's coming in. You know, processing. And so for me to be able to help anyone, I have to hear where they are, because grief is unique. We were talking before the
cameras came on.
cameras
Yeah.
came on.
Yeah.
And we were talking about someone discussing what an onion may taste like or what a cheeseburger tastes like.
Right.
You know, what it tastes like for you with your palate may be different from my experience.
That's right.
You know,
But we both like it.
but we both like it. And in my mind, I'm only basing my enjoyment of that food
From your point of view.
from my point of view. And so I have got to make sure if I'm going to help someone, it's to hear where they are in this journey of what we call grief.
You had made a good point, too, in our last conversation, too.
Yes.
That I always still refer back to myself now. I never really heard it put this way, but you broke it down a little bit. Of you hear, but also when you're hearing them talk to you, tell you about their feelings, and I mean, you're just listening. You're doing more than just hearing them. You're listening to and looking at them, because you're there with them. So you're seeing how are they crying with it? Are they acting their emotionless? You start to kind of get a feel or denial. You start to you'll know.
Right. It's again, I think, you know, we refer to that as empathy.
Yeah.
You know, it's exercising compassion and empathy, I think, based out of the experience as a young pastor. I was 28 years old when my father passed away. He spent 8 years suffering through a stroke, being at home.
Yeah.
And what we as a family experienced, how a team, a hospice team and a chaplain, you know, even spent time educating, you know, this young pastor.
Yeah.
Knowing that I have, by nature, is an assertive and aggressive personality. You know, so for me, even though theologically I understood that God is good,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I was angry.
Yeah.
You know, I had the whys. You know, a good father dying at the age of 53. And so, you know, my emotions and my experience of what I went through during that time and how difficult it was for me in accepting and working through the process of grief has motivated and become a passion, you know, to make sure that those that I have influence with, you know, am privileged to connect with, you know, that they understand this complex subject and you know, what a person feels through that time.
And see, you have a servant's heart,
Yeah.
and you just called it a privilege
Yes.
to sit with somebody in the absolute darkest hour.
Right.
And I know I had these thoughts in my head too. After our first show, a long time ago, you watching these emotions with this family or person or whatever the situation is, in their very darkest hour, Todd, not the chaplain, but Todd, is a human, and you're also feeling these emotions too,
Right.
listening. But you have chose, which everybody I talk to likes you and loves how you do things because you do listen. But at the same time, I know there's a human in you with a human response.
Right.
And you're there for the other people, but you're taking the brunt of that too because your emotions are firing off subconsciously the whole time they're talking as well. But yet you chose to do that and still call that a privilege when emotionally, I'm sure you've went home
Went home empty.
and just
You know.
gas tank is
Yeah.
completely gone.
Yeah.
You gave them everything.
There are many, many days at the end of the day, and sometimes for a season and a period, you know, when there are multiple losses back to back. You know, maybe you've been with a family for 6 months or 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, versus 2 weeks, there's levels of investment and time. And so emotionally, that strain for caregivers, I think about nurses, I think of social workers and those that I work alongside, and that investment of time within a patient's life or a family's life. You know, the experience of grief and that loss affects us as well.
It does. And, you know, I had to bring that up because my whole career, I can't count how many times I've got the privilege, I'll use that word, to stand beside a friend. You know,
Right.
that person came in as a patient,
Right.
turned out to be a friend.
Right.
And up until that last minute, still standing there. And I know the world, you know, just through the world's lenses, I guess appear that I shouldn't be emotional at that moment because I'm working, you know. But the human in me, and I can't change that.
Right.
And, you know, I will do my best to comfort someone around me, family, especially if family is involved when the person is actively dying.
Yes.
And I'm trying to do what I have to do for the job part. But sometimes I just get emotionally wrapped up myself, and it shocks me still, even though that's my job to be with them. You know, how do you, when the gas tank's empty, because literally, and folks that don't know exactly what we're talking about, spiritually, emotionally tired, hungry, you sit there probably had to use the bathroom and still didn't move because they were in a moment of talking to you. How do you recharge that gas tank? Because in your world, you can be 30 minutes in the car and all of a sudden another call comes.
You know,
And you got to fill it up.
for me, and that's all I can answer for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I understand that not everyone that I encounter, you know, not everyone is a person of faith.
No.
But for me, my faith is integral to recharging. You know,
He knows when you need it.
unless you allow God to speak into your life, sit before Him. You know, find that inner peace and purpose. You know, the purpose in which I feel God has called me drives my determination to push ahead. And so, you know, and I always go back to a work ethic that was instilled by my father. You know, I remember a man who did not have much, and mechanic. He did auto body work. He was a machinist.
He do it all.
He could do it all. And one of the memories in my mind is walking into a shop. It was about 7:30. We woke up that morning. my mom said, "Where's your dad?" He's not here. And I go into the shop and I open the doors, and there's 2 feet sticking out from under a car. And he had fallen asleep
Oh, Lord.
working
Yeah.
into the night
Wow.
and was sound asleep under the car. And so that kind of work ethic,
You'll never unsee that.
never unsee that. He did so because he loved his family.
Yeah.
And I think your love for other people. My intense love of what I experienced as a child and what I saw demonstrated where my parents took individuals into their home.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just, that motivates what I do and why every day.
Do you often wonder if he'd be proud of you now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
See, we have a sort of similar stories. I lost my dad at 60. It's I'm way too young then too.
Right.
Because we don't. There's not a good age
Right.
for all, but that work ethic that I also witnessed has played the major impact in my life.
Yeah.
Working through pain.
Right.
What is a cold day? That didn't matter. There were no snow days. There were no holidays.
Right.
Whatever needed to get done got done. And I think, well, now I know, you said it, that is why you do what you do so well with grief.
Yes.
And it sounds interesting. I guess a lot of people are like, it really works off what his dad thinks now? I do. I do. Sometimes I don't want to work.
Right.
I mean, they always see us there, right?
Yes.
Somewhere. But we're human,
Right.
and sometimes it's a long day. And it sure would be good to sleep in. Right before you got to get up 30 minutes, that's when you start sleeping, right?
Yes.
And when that happens, I draw my dad. And I just know that I'll never still be able to impact a fourth of how he impacted. So I'm always striving to be him. And with folks, I think you can take that, especially because you brought up the point of your faith.
Yes.
And when you're helping a family go through this, and even a family without faith, I'm certain that they find a connection with you and a comfort with you.
I have sat across the table and along the bedside
Yeah.
with those who've shook their fist at me when I walked in. You're coming in, I want you to know I'm angry with God.
Yeah.
Some not believing at all,
Right.
but wanting to have a conversation because they are confused.
Yeah.
They are hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting alongside a gentleman who asked that I come just to talk to him.
Yeah.
We sat out on his porch overlooking a lake.
Right.
Many, many conversations, and to help him come to a place of peace and answer some of the emotional experiences he was having, and with his family. Even if someone doesn't have faith, they still love their families. Like I mentioned, my father.
Yeah.
In that experience, there is that common denominator that you must find
Yeah.
in their experience.
In their experience.
Yeah, to help them.
Do you find when a situation occurs where you go in for the first time and let's say this is going to not necessarily be a short relationship that you're going to have with this family, and this can go on for a while, like you said earlier. Do you ever find that the family of the patient is possibly causing the patient to have anxiety?
Oh, absolutely.
So when you see that, I guess you have to measure and gauge, and at the same time, you're having to work with both.
Well,
How do you bring that to
as a chaplain, when you are helping to assist a family and a patient, that's the point. You are there for the patient,
yes,
but you're also there for each of the family members that are walking through that experience with their loved one, and I'm assessing,
yes,
how I need to best help them process their grief, encourage what I call, or what others have called, good grief. Now, a person could be
Yeah.
angry, it's still good grief.
right,
You can be tearful and sad, but it's allowing people to experience processing and going through that experience, and maybe having them to explain, well, why are you so anxious, or why are you so angry, and expressive of that, and maybe helping them with an avenue to, if that anger is causing the loved one to be upset, giving them a different setting to express
right,
that in a way that may not affect or hinder that patient or the loved one, whichever one it may be. It's setting up the proper setting where they can process their grief.
See, it's so complicated.
Yes.
That is.
Yes,
That's
it
what that,
really is. You've got to listen. You've got to love.
the love part, but the listen. I can imagine some situations that I know you've been in. We talked about before, where you just sat there, like you said. You used to sit on the side of the bed or sit at the chair, and even though nothing was said, all the words you understood.
Yeah. I think about the little analogy, or the little story of the little boy. His mother came in and saw my granddad and said, what was you doing? He said, I was helping him cry. Sometimes you just have to come alongside people.
Right. And
Allow them to weep. Feel that with empathy, feel their pain. Weep alongside them.
and
Embrace their tears.
you said the word allow.
Yeah,
I think that's so important for people to understand that it's okay.
it is okay.
And when they see it, when you almost give them confirmation that it's okay,
Right.
it changes things.
It does.
So it's going back to you introducing yourself to them. You have that, I don't even know if it's 30 seconds to make a connection.
Right.
Where somehow they feel like, I can talk to this man. Because this may be a 6'4", 245-pound son, that's tough and never cries, but his dad's dying. That's complicated.
And connecting with so many different people, who have religious backgrounds, who have different experiences, and somebody said, well, how do you do it?
Yeah.
I wish I could explain it.
Right. And see, I think...
And because I tell people that's just a connection that God has to form.
Right.
From my perspective of faith. I think the empathy, I think the genuineness of my own experience,
Right.
desire to help another person heal, allows that bond, no matter who they are, where they've come from. I've never met them. I think the knowledge,
Yeah.
because we're there to learn.
Right.
And so in the process, I'm constantly teaching, whatever emotion they're experiencing. I'm teaching how they can, but I do it in a way.
Yeah.
More casual, relating experiences of the past as well as, what knowledge we have, through learning.
How many times have you had the patient look at you and say, Todd, I'm scared to die?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do to help them with that?
Again, you've got to find out what their fear is.
Is there a common have you noticed that a lot of people have the same?
Oh, I do. It doesn't matter if a person has a rock solid, Judeo Christian background,
Right.
or maybe they're Muslim or whatever it may be. There is still this natural fear,
Yeah.
that stinging fear of death, that unknown, those uncharted waters.
Right.
And it's helping a person navigate to find out what that fear may be, because it can be different. It may be that they have some concept in their mind of what it's going to be like, or
I bet so.
Yes.
I bet, because I can only imagine, because I put myself in your shoes, and how I would reply to that. That's intense, because the person is asking you, and once again, we have to come from a part of what you know, and we know what you believe,
right.
but at the same time, you have to keep.
Because the afterlife, within a person's understanding of what that's going to be like is different.
Just like our cheeseburger.
Just like our cheeseburger. So you, again, it's such broad, but you've got to have an understanding of people's cultural experiences, of their faith experiences, their background religiously, and it's helping them, or whether there's the absence of that, it's helping them based on what they may conceive or perceive the afterlife to be like.
I want to ask you about the acceptance part,
Okay.
because I've seen this in my career a lot, but it's interesting how it can be. I don't want to use the word sad. I mean, because that's too broad of a word for a subject that's already very broad.
Right.
But the initial contact, and they've told you, chaplain, I'm scared, things like this, and you start talking with them, listening, like you said, and you're just working with them to create a relationship of trust. I always find it interesting when we get to a point of acceptance with someone, then all of a sudden the next thing a family member hears, because they didn't hear all your hours of conversation with this person, is y'all sitting there laughing together at a TV, laughing about stories, going off. You took the subject of dying away, and all of a sudden they're living
Right.
and talking with you. That has to be rewarding in your heart.
It is. That's, as you're just sitting there, I'm getting excited, because there are those moments when you're sitting alongside or across, however you may be positioned.
Sure.
It's always different. But that moment is always the same.
Yes.
When you see the demeanor and the facial expressions, when you begin to hear from their voice,
Right.
that tone change, and that acceptance is something that is definitely a great reward for any person in the field.
There's nothing like that.
Right.
Because now I see it as, when it happens, and I see it now that we've now created a friendship,
Right.
and you're not dead till you're dead.
Oh, no.
So that friendship now that you have with this person, now they get to tell the stories, and other people start to follow around, and you see the energy change with the other family as well,
Right.
because they start smiling all of a sudden again. And then in a room where people start laughing,
Because a part
Everybody
of their
laughs.
part of their grief, a part of loved ones' grief is based on, maybe their fears, or maybe they're being overwhelmed when they see their own loved one experience the pain of grief.
Yeah.
Or those emotions that they're going through affects everyone in the room.
Right.
Whether it be the caregiver, the loved one, or whether
Yeah.
it be the person
patient.
dying and the
Yeah.
patient themselves.
It does.
And so it's so multifaceted. And
It's hard, but I think you going in, you strive to get to that point of acceptance because you know what happens after that. That's when things start really working for everybody.
Right.
Because, no one wants to die alone, is a saying. But that's not necessarily the truth of things.
yeah, it's not necessarily the truth. There's some people who do.
And you get to see that,
There's
too.
some people who do want to be alone.
And what they think is helping.
And it's kind of like it's not my responsibility to force someone to acceptance.
No.
I can facilitate a process, but allowing them and helping them navigate whatever it is that they're experiencing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, it's easy to pick on anger,
Yeah.
or it's easy to target anxieties.
Yeah.
That a person may be feeling, or even loneliness.
Yeah.
But allowing them and helping them work through that. Now, some people say, well, the goal is definitely acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in my mind, that may be where the tracks I want to lead.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to respect, how they feel, and allow them their own time frame, their own moments. It has to be where I open up and give them a total free space.
Yeah.
To be able to work through that in their mind
And that's
and
comforting
their
to
heart.
them.
Yes, and I let people know, hey, we've got all day.
Well, and one thing that I've had conversations with care staff, caregivers, nurses,
Yeah.
doctors, all through the years. One commonality of these conversations was the ability to know how and when to give that space to someone, because, what we perceive that they're telling us, we need to read between the lines sometimes, because they may be just telling you a general statement, but they're thinking of a person they're leaving behind, or something unfinished, or something. So, but you now gave them almost a permission to have that space, maybe cleared out the room of the people, or whatever, so they can start breaking it down within themselves, of this thing that we all know how the book ends. But we're having to work through it ourselves now. In your experience, and this is a loaded question, but it would definitely have to be something I know you've asked yourself. What would you now, if you could travel back to when you first started, tell yourself to prepare for or to do? What would you tell Todd,
Whoa.
a 20-year-old Todd, knowing that this is you have chosen a field where you go in and, like we said, the honor, you get the privilege of helping people through their worst time. What would you tell yourself now that you've learned after seeing all this and the emotions and a million different possibilities of how this story starts? What would you tell Todd?
As I mentioned, being very assertive and aggressive by nature. I've been goal-oriented, from one to another. Oftentimes, my work ethic gets in the way of experiencing life. And so I think slowing down,
Smell
that
the
whole
roses.
aspect of listening, the greatest gift you can offer your loved ones, and the greatest gift that God has has given to us is the relationship that we hold with Him, with others, and just taking every day to enjoy the experience, and whether that's experiencing grief or whether that's on a mountaintop, enjoying life. It's slowing down, relishing each experience and learning from those experiences. Like I said, even if it's grief, there's so much I've learned.
What would probably be interesting, though, I just thought of myself, well, you're talking about that at 20 or 21.
Yeah.
I would tell myself the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know that my 21-year-old brain would be able to comprehend it yet.
This is true.
So I think it's sort of the art of aging that gives us that a more delicate pair of eyes.
Right.
Noises that once were either bothersome or we never heard, all of a sudden we're listening to them. It's like a song, for example. You may know a song and can just sing it in your car, and all of a sudden one day that song relates to you.
Right.
And it's like, wow. And it's a powerful and emotional thing, and that comes with time, with age. There's always, the aspects that still amaze me to this day of dealing with pain, grief, every emotion, to be honest with you, because we talk of grief, but we're actually in a boxing match with 100 other emotions that make up that word.
Right.
And that's tough. In a situation that I know you also have to deal with, and this is a hard topic, but I always cover it. When we normally think of that, we're picturing in our head a person that has lived life, older. But you also have to look at the other end of it, and you have to with young people.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find one more challenging than the other, or do you feel that when you work with a younger person, and it doesn't have to be a child either. I mean, say someone that's in that life. Do you see?
I think I mentioned this when we first began about the intensity.
Yeah.
And that's what I guess I would refer to it more of the intensity of the emotion.
Yeah.
Of the grief experience. Whether it be the intensity of your anger, or whether it be the intensity of your sadness, or your despair. Definitely age is a factor. When you feel
right
that someone hasn't experienced life. If a child, or if a teenager, or young father or mother.
Right.
That intensity heightens.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Find that the case.
Yeah, I personally have not had a career dealing with young patients or people, but I understand that it's a different approach for the simple fact that a young person, they don't know necessarily how good or bad the world really is.
Mm-hmm.
So some things they're not already predisposed to. So some of the fears they're not even having. That's why you see a lot of these tough. I will go like to the Shriners Hospital and things like this, and the kids know, but a lot aren't afraid of anything that we are afraid of adults, because it seems like as we get older, we look at our life, the book of our life, and we've got hit with a lot of pain and seeing good things, great things, love things, hated things. I mean, we have got to experience a trepidation of just waterfalls of life. But if you haven't had to deal with those horrible things and good things, but you're just a happy person and accept what somebody tells you as this is what happens, it seems like on my visits, they'll go right back and start playing Xbox and living, because that's all they know how to do. They don't have to worry about what's next or what happened before.
With pediatrics, and I think about children in general.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, a child's resilient. No. Their experience of loss is just like ours.
Yeah.
It is all unique to them. Taking the time to listen to those children. allow them to open up.
That teaches us something.
And so for whoever is walking through that as their therapist or whoever their person may be that is connected with them, you definitely have to be willing to listen to what fears that child may have.
Sure.
Or what emotions they are experiencing.
And you being able to get to that level.
And facilitating that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To get to that level where you're understanding what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy for someone to act mature, or act stoic, I guess.
Right.
But it's very difficult for an adult to act childlike. I mean, to really put our brain there,
Right.
take it back. We have our memories of what we had.
I think adults complicate a lot of issues.
I think we
complicate a lot.
self-destruct
We do.
a lot.
We do.
But the reason this subject is always ongoing for me, and it's just so powerful because people that are going to watch this, and a lot of people that watch this, most people are obviously in healthcare. We have people in banking and stuff that watch this, which I love.
Right.
But being that it's a dual subject, it's a subject that not only I need the medical professionals to hear, sort of understand your process, what you have to do, because it coincides with the care plan, an actual plan of you allowing
That's
these
developed.
times. And so they need to see it from your side because we're looking at a care plan. There's a time that the patient has medications. There's a time that they're going to eat that could be facilitated by hospice or family or whatever, how that's working. But then your time is equally as important.
Oh, absolutely.
It has to all go together. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times in being a chaplain, it's respected with healthcare, but nowhere when I went to school, to be quite honest with you, did that subject come up that we had to take tests on what a chaplain does.
The spiritual
the spiritual need.
Role.
Honestly, I mean, it was brushed over. It was
well,
more
that's
of
the
a
unique
box.
thing about the hospice philosophy.
Right. It was a little box. It was a brief go over box. What I had to learn for myself when I had graduated college and started doing this professionally as a nurse, that's how it started as a nurse, was their role of exactly what they do.
I think that area has grown tremendously within healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledging the role
so
of
important.
spirituality, cultural experiences.
Yes.
I have taught many classes to social workers and doctors and nurses as well. On cultural diversity.
Do you see what I see when you teach those classes? How little they really knew about the impact of that
of spirituality within.
It kind of amazes me a little because
for some I would say yes, but being that I primarily hold classes and interact with people in this area.
Yeah.
Where we are in this region, whether
it's very strong faith in this area.
Yes,
it is very strong.
So I do have people who interact with me that are more open,
mm-hmm.
and see that should be an influence.
There's and I certainly won't call this person out, but for years and years when I first started, there was a chaplain, and I heard him in many rooms over the years, and each conversation was different, and I thought he was magic because the person would be distressed, family distressed, and I'm watching all this. It looked like getting ready to be chaos of emotions maybe, and this one chaplain would come, and he knew when to listen, he knew when to talk, he knew when to laugh, he knew when to cry, he knew when to throw everybody out of the room and say, we're going to talk and watch a movie, Indiana Jones, and we'll tell you when to come back, because you were giving them space. You were doing all these things that you're trained to do, but you're having to orchestrate it like a movie where they don't understand what you're doing.
They don't understand what you're
It's
doing.
trickery, but it's for the patient
Right.
first. And
Right.
and to be quite honest with you, that inspired me to be better at what I do, listening to this chaplain for so long,
Right.
because it made me, when I would have to go in as a nurse, obviously, and give medications and deal with some things that patients find embarrassing or problematic, and that's what I was there for. I sort of captured that style and also learned a lot and believed a lot of what he was saying too.
Right.
And I found it made my job so much easier, because I guess I would maybe do a warm-up before he came back with the patient, because
Right.
then it started becoming continuity of care. You know, everybody's sort of on the same field because we know what you're going to do, and I get to incorporate some of that too, and listen to the stories. But they don't see me just as medicine man, as a guy having to do these horrible tasks that they don't want done anyway. But who would? Where now he's going to do it, but they also get to see the inner me, and I learned that from the chaplain. Mm-hmm. And it changed me we're talking a long time ago, you know.
I've had a wonderful rapport and relationship with our nurses.
Yeah. Oh, I know. No, they have
the
told
care
me.
team, you know.
I don't believe, and I want to give a shout out to Wren Hospice.
Yes.
For sure. Many of the people that you work alongside of have just told me in stories that they come to you because you're just as important to them
Right.
as you are to the patient. So it's the Wren team. Sometimes their emotions of what they do is very difficult too.
Absolutely.
And they need you.
And I even find that with facilities.
Yeah.
We interact and coming alongside facility staff.
Yeah.
You know, is another aspect of what a chaplain does in helping people grieve. Mm-hmm. You know, process what they're feeling, what patients they're serving. Sometimes it's questions about, you know, a patient. Sometimes it's about how they feel. Mm-hmm. You know, what they're going through. So, you know.
What I find, though, is your rapport. Once, and this comes from three I can think of right away, people that you work with. Just when they're having a day.
Right.
You know, and they get to chat with you. You know how to just come in and talk to them, because the word chaplain can be scary to some, because, and what I mean by this is interesting. They're scared to just do real talk with you. You know, almost, I don't want to let anything slip.
Right.
The bad words. But then again, you make it so very open that you're human. Yes, this is my belief system. This is what I do. But you push that aside for them to be able to talk and interact with you.
I think if any pastor's wise, I think
it's awesome.
If you even as a chaplain, you it goes back to even with grief, you've got to allow people to be human.
And we miss that.
You've got to take the time, be interested in who they are, where they are, what they're going through.
Right.
And when you create that atmosphere,
right,
you know, you allow that atmosphere to exist.
Yeah.
You know, people will open up. They will share.
Isn't it funny, though? Because we work alongside people every day of our life that we would never share remotely a secret with, not even our darkest secrets ever.
Right.
But yet we also work alongside somebody like yourself that gives us the space and allows us to do such.
Yeah.
And it's therapeutic. And for both of us, actually, sometimes, because what a lot of people don't realize with a chaplain or a person that deals with people's spiritual needs, their emotional needs, all of that. Mm-hmm. I know we got, many different little factors there, but we're talking about care planning and everything. But what they don't understand is you're like a small board of directors. Y'all have to work off each other. Mm-hmm. And the staff, obviously, their needs are great emotionally too, but you also get to have that real talk with them, and you can give them your experiences, and that's actually you telling them.
Right.
So it's doing something for you too.
Oh, yeah.
without them even realizing it. Because I used this in our last comment, but I always say tell somebody, well, let me contact my board of directors. I got 10 people in my head. You're one of them. You're the chaplain. When I have a question, like when it gets this intricate, because I know this show is very intricate. Everybody's going, okay, still, what is grief? That's the point, that it's huge. There's not a way to start the word nor finish the word. It is being with them where they're at that moment. Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to start. So there's no way you can go, hey, my name's Todd. This is what I do, and here's the same act.
We can lay out the 5 stages, or whether you choose 7 stages or 4 cycles or go through phases, having a knowledge of those things, but allowing that experience.
Yes.
Listening to that person, allowing them to open up.
Yes.
Empathy of putting yourself where they are, going through experiences, relating. It's taking all of that through that moment.
Right.
Of whatever level of loss that may be for them, whether it's the patient, the family, And
you meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And so that's just so important, because I believe that is, in healthcare, it looks like our new view, our new way that we're approaching many things, meeting people where they are. We say that in dementia care. We say that, and it seems to have more of an impact now, just putting it in those terms, where caregivers and staff and families now start to understand the same knowledge, the same word. For so long, we were separated, with terms such as adult failure to thrive. That's what the family was told. Well, what does that really even mean? I was failing to thrive a long time ago with certain things, and so this complicated talk with family members, helping them understand what's going on and getting everybody back on the same page, is easier done with meeting them where they are and bringing it together there. Not trying to, let me give you these big fancy words, but giving them the space. Here's your 5 stages if you want. Here's 7 if you want it. But you know what? We're all different, because you talked about that earlier. Me as the person dealing with someone that's dying or has just passed.
Right.
I may not need 7. I may not need 5.
And it's definitely not in a linear motion.
No.
It's just,
no.
It's off the chain what a person feels in any given day or a moment. So.
Oh yeah, and you said
I think you take just the base of what you know.
The base of what you know.
And you've got to have the wisdom and the grace to listen.
Yes.
And
see, this I'm pushing
process through.
And not to interrupt, but obviously, I deal with folks now on a pharmacy level every day. But I get to help with their training, setting that up, what that looks like. And I encourage everybody that I work with in your training, this certain part, and that a lot of states, they cover different activities and social awareness, things of that nature. To have a chaplain come do it, because that way they get to know the chaplain, and the chaplain gives the best training ever to a group of people of just common knowledge, because we have a lot of young people going into healthcare right now that have not experienced any of these things yet.
That's right.
And that's an interesting fact. So they really do embrace when we're able to get the training and we're not talking about days. We're talking about, just an hour or so of what you do. Because it has to go in their care plan, but they're 21, 22 right out of school. Mm-hmm. So they haven't experienced a lot of what they already need to know going into this field. And I've seen this work after the training. They become friends with the chaplain. They learn from the chaplain of just how to emotionally act or interact, I should say. And then the third most powerful thing I see after that is, after they have done it, their emotions hit them because it's the first time, and they call the chaplain that they've already made friends with and established, so that you've already opened that line of communication. So the education part of it, and that is actually how we describe grief, is by continuously talking about it and learning and feeling and assessing but listening. Sometimes, I keep going back to this, and I'll say it again. So many times in life, somebody doesn't have to say a word, but with enough experience, you're hearing them.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, like you said, sitting on the porch just looking out at the lake.
Right.
And
But
still a
definitely
moment.
allowing the space for professionals,
Yeah.
people, to decompress.
Yes.
After they've, experienced a tough situation with a patient or a family, and allowing them to talk through.
It's all about allowing.
Yeah.
And that, that's where I'm going to end this right there, because it's almost where you, in particular, and I can't speak for others, but I know many others, many other chaplains and pastors, people of spiritual, different faiths, the way they do things, giving that permission, helping them. It's not like you all of a sudden, you had control over it to begin with.
Right.
You have actually opened it up, though, and somehow given them permission, because it's more like you're not the family member, you're not somebody else, and you give them that space, and you've heard what they said. And allowing someone to do something, it helps so much, because you had to think back when you were a child, and your dad okay, you can drive it. You can drive the car. You felt free.
Right.
And that same feeling you're getting because you're allowing them, because they don't know else now to turn. So basically, at this point, we thank people like you for doing what you do, whether it's you coming in and have to speak 1,000,000 hours to somebody,
right,
or sitting looking at the lake. I appreciate you helping the families. I know you go above and beyond personally. I've heard there's many families you still keep in contact with long after, because you care and you have the servant's heart to do so. And I wanted people to listen, go back and listen to our first podcast, and come look at us now, because now they can get a visual.
Right.
I don't know what they'll think about the visual. They're going to be like, "Oh, buddy, this is a problem." No, but we're allowing them to get inside, and you allowed us to take a few minutes of your world to see what and how complicated this is. So you have to meet them where they are and give them the space. But allowance is really
I
so
think
important.
allowing,
It's awesome.
and then respecting.
It's awesome.
Respecting everyone's person.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do when you allow.
Because you're allowing them to leave this world
with dignity
and no judgment.
Right.
And that's powerful. And I know that there are a lot of people one day that's going to pat you on the back going, "Thank you. You gave me that encouragement I needed." Because just because we have that label that we're dying, we all do, but when you're in the act of, you're still human. And you gave them permission and gave them the dignity, space, all those things that we went through.
Yeah.
And it's complicated, but not everybody can do it, and you can. So thank you again. I want to thank Wren Hospice.
Well, thank you, Andy, for the opportunity to be
No,
a part of the show.
you're awesome.
Yeah, great.
Because it's so much information, but people need to hear it. So obviously, they can contact me as always. My information will be on the screen. I'll get in touch with Todd if you have a question.
Is there any way I can be a help?
Any way you can help,
Any
because
way.
we literally could sit at this table and break each branch off this tree for days.
You could.
Of emotion.
You
But
really could.
My main goal here is for you guys to know that what a chaplain does is so very important in the care planning of a person's care and life. And also the thought process of somebody that I do trust. I trust Todd. I like how he gives you the ability to meet you where you're at as a coworker, as whatever, but help lead us down the right path to get back to some harmonious level that I don't think we can ever really get to. Right. So Once again, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody that certainly watches the show. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Andy at selectcarerx.com. I will field those for you, respond right back. And certainly anything to share to Todd, I will shoot it over to him, and I know he'll get back with you. But until next episode, God bless.